Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Amy McGrath with us today. We'll chat with Amy in just a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, Amy McGrath is a political and national security analyst, a former fighter pilot and U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, founder of Democratic Majority Action PAC, Democratic nominee for the U.S. House and Senate from Kentucky, and the author of Honor Bound, An American Story of Dreams and Service. She also, along with co-host former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, recently launched the brand new podcast, Truth in the Barrel, about politics and national security. Amy, welcome into the back room.
Great to be with you.
So I want to start by just asking you about your new podcast, which you recently launched with your co-host, former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman.
Yeah, it's called Truth in the Barrel. And, Denver and I knew each other over the last few years. We've got to know each other, and we both are truth tellers. We both love our country. We both served at Denver in the Air Force, myself in the Marine Corps. And he ran as a Republican. I ran as a Democrat. And we kind of felt like there needed to be more truth tellers out there, that this could be a good balance where we're not always going to agree on everything, but that there is so much disinformation and misinformation out there that we wanted to be a place where people could listen and count on to go beyond the headlines on things. And the thing about it is, Andy, our background is mostly national security, but we touch on a lot of just general politics topics because we both ran for office. And Denver was a congressman for one term. So I think there's a lot out there that we can add to the conversation. And I'm really excited to launch this thing about a month ago.
And so what you're saying is there could be a Republican and a Democrat who may disagree on some national policy issues, but on the big picture, like rule of law, the Constitution,
absolutely,
national security, we could actually sit down and agree and have an amicable relationship. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Amazing.
Stunning,
and I think
it?
People are hungry for that. They're hungry for like common sense stuff and get away from this craziness that is happening in our country. And I think that's what we're trying to provide here.
Years ago, during his first term, he used to say a lot that unwittingly, Donald Trump, his greatest legacy is going to be that he has united people that never would have been together in any shape or form before. And if we jump ahead now 10 years and we see how the Bill Kristols and the Rick Wilsons, all these conservatives who used to be the ones Democrats would be fighting in every election, now we're aligned. Scaramucci.
We are.
We are. Because one day he will be gone. And what might be left is a better landscape where we all have realized, wow, we are united on some really important things that we didn't maybe appreciate before. And we could appreciate each other. And I think that's what your podcast and your relationship with Denver bring out into the forefront.
I mean, I think this is exposing, the age of Trump is exposing the people who really love this country, and that the Bill Kristols of the world, they're very conservative. But you know what? Conservative values actually are ones that care about the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
Actually care about the size and scope of government, and don't believe that government should be going after law firms and judges and all of these things that Donald Trump is doing. And I feel like that is a way right now to at least talk about that kind of stuff, because we're really seeing people who I once thought were conservative, Republican, that would stand up for this country. They're not doing it, and they haven't done it. Guys like Marco Rubio, for example.
Shameful.
He has just folded. He knows what he's doing is wrong. He knows getting behind this president is wrong, but he's folded for power. Mitch McConnell is kind of a tweener, right? He did it for a very long time, in part was responsible for the rise of Donald Trump. In recent months, he has written op-eds against the tariffs and lots of other things. And it almost looks like he has a little bit of buyer's remorse, but it's too late.
Or he's starting to see Jesus up there and knows they're going to be meeting at some point in the not too distant future. And he's just trying to make a different bed to sleep in, which is great. I don't care what any of these people did yesterday. As long as today they're doing the right thing, then let's roll with that, because the more people in this battle with us, the better. And, Mitch McConnell, I think, does have still a lot of influence with a certain segment of our population. And who cares why he's changed his tune? Who cares, really?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the military and SignalGate. You are a former fighter pilot and U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, and you understand this space very well. There's new allegations that Hegseth shared sensitive military details in a private Signal chat that included his wife, his brother, his lawyer. This follows a month of utter chaos at the Pentagon, including the firing of several top officials over major policy disagreements, people that were friends of his that he brought in to help run the Pentagon. But he never should have been confirmed in the first place. But is it now absolutely the time for him to go?
Well, I never thought he should have been in the position in the first place, as you just said. I mean, he's not qualified for the job. He's never run an organization larger than your neighborhood Starbucks. And that organization that he ran, which a small veterans group, consisted of about 30 people, and he ran it into the ground financially. He just doesn't have the values that the military uplifts, and values of integrity and character. But all that aside, what has he done as soon as he got into office? He fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He fired many of the top brass for no reason. He fired the top JAGs. Those are the lawyers. So if you want to do something unethical with the military, guess the first thing you do is fire the lawyers and put in people that are going to do what you tell them to do.
Can you explain that a little, like what the JAGs, who they are, the critical importance of the role they served, and the dangers that now exist without them?
Yeah, we still have JAGs. It's just the firing of the top JAGs sends a message, right? It sends a message of, if you don't go along with what I want to do, I will find somebody that will go along. What the JAGs are is they are the lawyers. So if a commander always has a lawyer sort of by his or her side to know what it is that commander can do by law, not just from a perspective of foreign interventions. We follow the laws of war, for example, but also for the use of military in on the domestic side. And so when President Trump, during the last Trump 1.0, said during the George Floyd protests, he reportedly said to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, "Why can't we just shoot these protesters in the leg? Get the military to shoot them." And General Milley said, "We can't do that, sir. We're not going to do that." Now, think now we're in Trump 2.0. He may want to use the military in ways that are unethical and have not been used before. That is just one example. And it's the lawyers that are going to say, no, we can't do that. Now, people need to understand that it isn't a black and white law that prohibits our military from doing certain things on U.S. soil. It's actually a very much a gray area. And that is the concern. We've never had a president that has ever wanted to use the military in such an unethical way before. But there's no law that says that he can't. And that's where the lawyers come in, where you want people that are smart on the law, but you want people that are going to advise commanders appropriately. So I hope that answers your question, but it's a very, very scary time. But the SignalGate, going back to Secretary of Defense Hegseth, is just anybody in the military would be fired by now for what he has done. And I could talk about that if you want to.
Yeah. I've seen you refer to him as Sec Bro, which I love. Did you make that up?
I think I got that from one of my, I have a lot of friends who are other females who have been in the military or are in the military. And I think I got that from one of them. So I'm I'm sort of passing that on, and I think it's appropriate.
It's great. I love it. And also, on this somewhat lighter note, how ironic is it that someone's so obsessed with trans service people and anti-woke rhetoric reportedly wants his own personal powder/makeup room at the Pentagon?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it shows tremendous insecurity. Because if you are given the responsibility of the entire Department of Defense, which is 3 million people, and all of the resources to go and the defense of our nation, and you're sitting there tweeting out stuff about DEI and trans people and this latest thing about the makeup room. I was just telling my husband just this morning, I'm like, it is amazing how many videos and tweets he has pushing back on this stupid makeup story. I mean, that's what he cares about. And he's spending all of his time and energy, like, because he's so damn insecure with himself. And that's a recipe for disaster. And the thing that people need to understand about this man, from what I can tell from watching him, is he's a deadly combination of inexperience and arrogance. Meaning the Secretary of Defense job is so big, almost nobody is really prepared to go into that job. I mean, it's very, very hard.
True.
Hegseth is uniquely underqualified, not qualified for the job, and he knows it. He knows it. And anybody who is so unqualified could muddle through if they were humble, if they listened to the 3 and 4 stars that surround them, the colonels. They had some idea of, hey, let's not go in here and break everything right off the bat and fire everybody. He's arrogant. And this gets right to the Signal chat piece, because he was told by aides, don't do this. But he's so arrogant that, he's like, I know better. I can easily put time on targets and launch times for F-18s and the entire strike package on my cell phone and send that out. That's not a big deal. I know better than you guys. That's arrogance, and that's going to cost lives.
He just seems so jacked up all the time. I was joking to somebody earlier that, like, remember Lloyd Bridges in Airplane when he's sniffing glue? Like, to me, that's how Hegseth sounds every time he speaks. He is so in over his head, but for an institution with a culture that places so much emphasis on leadership and chain of command, what does it say to our active military, these brave men and women who signed up, risking their lives and their limbs to protect our democracy? What does it say to have this level of chaos at the Pentagon?
Well, I think the first thing it says is that the values of honor and character don't matter. And that is really sad, because the military does believe in these values. We instill this in people who serve in our military. And to have a guy like Pete Hegseth and unfortunately a commander-in-chief like Donald Trump shows that our country just doesn't care about those values. But the chaos is also really very damaging, because right now we're all talking about SignalGate and these leaks and all of the stuff that really the secretary himself has brought on himself. If you talk to people in the Pentagon, they can't be, outward and being on a show like yours. But when you talk to them, they'll say, yeah, he's not really well respected. We're all trying to do our job, and he is a distraction.
Is that just among the brass? I mean, one of the things I always worry.
No, it's among everyone.
I wonder, does the rank and file, does the 26-year-old kid, who's flying a plane somewhere overseas, is he feeling it? Is she feeling it the same way?
No, I think that the most of the military is not in the Pentagon. Most of the military is all around the world and all around the United States, and they are led by great Americans, by the way. It's just these guys at the top that are buffoons. So we should we should rest easy to know that our military has tremendous leaders that are making the trains run and defending our country. So I don't think Pete Hegseth is somebody that everybody in the military is thinking about all the time. I do think that it's damaging in the sense that we don't have great strategy right now, and it's hard for people at the higher levels to focus when you've got this guy who is unqualified and arrogant, and you never know what he's going to turn. And here's the other thing. There's no way to dissent at all in the military right now. We have the academies pulling books from their libraries because they don't want to offend Pete Hegseth. We have academies pulling down pictures of, women who have they wanted to show their cadets and midshipmen about certain people that they want to uplift, and that might be offensive to the Secretary of Defense, so they got to take that down. I mean, that is not a great culture to be working in at the moment.
How specifically do you think Hegseth leadership, or lack thereof, has made America, or is making America, less safe?
Well, for one, he's focused on bullshit stuff. All right, I'll just say it. If you're constantly focused on DEI and you're constantly focused on these culture wars, that is not what the military should be focused on, And it's just he has this thing with that. I mean, just the other day he's talking about we're not going to do any more green energy. We're getting rid of that woke stuff. Well, there is some real strategic value, Andy, to looking at green energy on the battlefield. Convoys, for example, the majority of our deaths in combat came by logistical convoys. Now, you're going to have some. You're always going to have convoys. You always need to replenish your troops on outposts. But if we can take some of that down by not having so many fossil fuel convoys, for example, and if you can power your outposts and your bases a different way, maybe make them more self-sufficient, then you cut down those convoys and you can save lives. This is true for the Navy as well. It's just like the inability to see. Here's another thing. Sea level rises. So the last 48 hours, the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of Defense are cheering on the Navy getting rid of any planning for climate change. Well, that's woke. Well, here's the thing, Andy. The water's coming. The sea levels are rising. And you're not going to plan for it? You know where our Navy bases are? Guess what? They're on the ocean. they're right there. Norfolk Naval Base, Key West Naval Air Station. I mean, there's studies out there that says Key West, that's where I learned how to dogfight. Key West Naval Air Station. That could be underwater in 50 years. We better plan for this. The United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, where I went to school and where I taught later on, when I went to school there back 20-some years ago, 20, 30 years ago now, we had like one flood every 4 or 5 years that made a lot of that campus unusable. You know what we're doing? We're having like multiple floods a year now that campus has to deal with. It is happening. We have to plan for it. It's just really dumb not to do that. And that's where I feel like Secretary Hegseth and his bros are fighting these culture wars and not looking at some of the things that we need to be looking at. That, again, is not even going into the Signal chat problem, which to me is just crazy because he took classified information. It is classified information. You can call it sensitive. It's classified. It is the most classified information that we have. Why? Because it directly relates to strikes that were impending, where pilots put their butts on the line. And he told everyone the time on target where you're the most vulnerable as a pilot is that time. You told everybody when that is. You told everybody the launch times, and even the strikes themselves, the existence of the strikes themselves. Guess what? That's classified. And he chatted it out to his friends and family.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of which was completely hackable by our enemies.
Hackable. And now everybody in the world knows that he's on Signal with his personal phone, and he doesn't seem to care. He just put it on his computer in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
The height of stupidity.
Yeah, and a willful circumvention of standards and protocols at the Pentagon for protecting this sensitive information.
And again, that's where the arrogance comes in. Mm-hmm. Look, he's never been in the Pentagon before. He was a National Guardsman. He rose to the rank of major. Okay, that's wonderful service. It's not service in the Pentagon. And he doesn't really know what he's doing. And he gets in there and he goes against all of these protocols. The protocols were put in there for a reason. Do you know that the Pentagon gets hacked tries to be hacked 1,000 times a day? So we want these systems to be secure. But if you have the Secretary of Defense just going around, hey, I think I'm going to do it on my own.
What do you think is the biggest, most consequential damage caused by him so far on the global stage?
Well, I think it's a part of the larger damage that the Trump national security team is completely incompetent and inept. It started when they went to Europe for the Munich conference. And, J.D. Vance was saying one thing, Hegsistential was saying something else. You had whatever ambassador they had, Keith Kellogg, come in 2 days later and say something completely different. Marco Rubio showed up a couple days late because of his plane had problems back at the State Department plane. He says something completely different. The world doesn't know what we stand for anymore. And so when you talk about just Pete Hegseth, he's just one of these completely incompetent minions. That Mike Waltz is another one, the national security advisor, can't get their stuff together. And I think the Signal chat was put together to try to get themselves on the same page, but they're not very competent in doing that. And I think that in and of itself is the most damaging because the world doesn't know what America stands for anymore.
Nor can it trust us with their
absolutely
top secret intelligence.
But I'm also worried about Pete Hegseth, trying to pull troops out of Europe. I don't think that's thought through. He's getting rid of programs that haven't within the Pentagon that were there for a reason, and just because he doesn't like them, he hasn't done any real deep dive into why we need these things. He tried to invite Elon Musk to the Pentagon to brief him on our war plans on China.
Yeah, and
reportedly was only stopped by people in the Pentagon saying, "No, don't do that."
He screamed at the then acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I'll fucking give you a lie detector test. That's the new scandal this week that has come out. Yeah, the people who have worked with him, as I said before, one of them wrote this piece in Politico, were friends of his that he brought in. And they are the ones now saying that it is just, the last month is utter chaos. Utter chaos.
And he comes out on these videos and says, well, the leakers are always going to leak. And if you knew that guy, you would know he was a leaker. Well, dude, you hired him. He was your guy. I mean, it's so bizarre and crazy that almost people in the defense community are kind of like, whoa, this is something we've never seen before.
Well, he's also, lifting from the Trump playbook, which he did like the second this new scandal broke. And it was like, it's the media. The media, they like to target people and bring them down. And it's not the media. Your own guys left and wrote a story about you. And
you're doing it. The media didn't put Jeffrey Goldberg in a Signal chat.
No, you invited
did that.
You invited the media onto that Signal chat. I mean, that's the irony. And I'm so glad you mentioned what you said before about Hegseth. This is just one example, because it's so true. Like, the Hegseth mess should not be viewed in a vacuum. It's part of a 10-year pattern with Trump in terms of his general disrespect and disdain for the military, as well as his current administration's horrible treatment of your fellow vets with regard to the federal spending cuts and terminations, especially given the fact that veterans comprise a third of the federal workforce. This must infuriate you and other veterans. It
does to me. I've always felt like, since the beginning of the rise of Trump, that he was somebody that doesn't stand for the values that what I was taught in the military. And the fact is that we care about things like character, and we care about things like integrity, and we care about things like leadership. You know, in the Marine Corps, when you're a Marine Corps leader, your platoon and everybody under you, you make sure that they're taken care of first, okay? You eat last. You're the last in line to get the supplies as the leader, okay? That is the Marine Corps ethos. You take care of your people first as the leader. Donald Trump is the opposite of that, right? He's the opposite of everything I was taught in the military in terms of what a leader should be. Take responsibility. Donald Trump doesn't do that. Be somebody that is honest. Donald Trump is not that. You know, respect. Donald Trump has no respect for anyone else. So that was the reason that I was so worried about our country when Donald Trump became president, because I felt like, what is it going to be like to have somebody as commander-in-chief who doesn't share the values at all of the people that he leads in the military? And I think it's becoming very clear, because remember, in Trump 1.0, he had surrounded himself with General Kelly, who was the chief of staff, General Mattis, as his Secretary of Defense, for example. And a lot of times those military men stopped him from doing what he wanted to do. And so this time around, he has not a whole lot of respect for them, for the military, because he knows that there's many inside the military who will not bow down to him the way that Pete Hegseth will, the way that Marco Rubio will, and all these other guys, that they will stand up for what's right. So that's why he doesn't like the military.
Well, this is a good segue into what I want to ask you, because obviously we're seeing something we've never experienced before. A rogue president who clearly wants to be a dictator, who is defying the courts, who has appointed his people at the top of the military. You know, any student of history will tell you that that's a precursor to how a lot of these autocrats eventually took a democracy and turned it into something else. We know from the first term that General Milley and others had some kind of little pact among them. Do you think that in the worst case Hollywood scenario where, like, there's riots in the streets and he declares martial law and then starts shooting protesters, and that's how the coup kind of starts, like, do you have any sense whether or not that same type of pact that Milley and the others had in the first term, like, would the military go along with his desire to turn us into an autocracy?
So a couple of things. One, the military is not, it's made up of lots of different people. So it is not just like, it's one big institution, but it's very large. And I believe that there would certainly be some people in the military that would go along with unethical orders. I do believe that.
Illegal orders.
And that's where the JAGs get in, right? Because if the JAGs are the ones that determine whether an order is illegal or not. And because the Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom, has given the president basically a blank check, meaning that whatever the president says it cannot be illegal, right? If it's an official act. So it's really put the military in a tough place if he does actually order something super unethical and what I would say illegal, because the JAGs are going to have to look at that and really make that determination. Would the military push back? Yeah, I think there would be a lot of people in the military that would push back. I think it would come down to what is the exact scenario. And I think that it's more likely to be a scenario where it slowly turns into something that is really bad, but that it's not a flip of a switch. In other words, I don't think there's going to be an order that says, okay, go shoot Americans.
Right.
It's not going to get to that. It's going to be slow walk into For example, now we're using the military to take folks who are undocumented and take them back to where they're from or to El Salvador or something like that. Now, what happens when somebody who's undocumented is living in a house with Americans? And now is the military going to go rip that person away from their family? What happens when that family fights back, right, and uses weapons? Now, are we going to use the military against our own people in that scenario? I think we need to think about all of these things. And I think that the higher up you are in the military, for the first time, maybe, a lot of these higher ranking officers are having to do some real soul searching on what the scenarios could be like under this current president and where their red line is. Because, remember, if you're in the military and you disobey, there's some real consequences to disobeying orders. And also, if you disobey and you get fired, he's just going to put somebody in there that's going to, follow through with it. And so I think that those people who are right now who are really trying to figure out, where is that red line? Where do I want to finally get fired over? Where do I stand up?
What's your biggest concerns on the domestic level outside of this SignalGate thing? What keeps you up at night when you see what's going on right now?
I think the attacks on our institutions, particularly the third branch of government right now, I'm very concerned. I just saw this morning, I don't know the accuracy of it, Andy, but the arrest of a judge, I think in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
This is very, very concerning to me because, when we start having one branch that does have the power, right? The executive branch has the military. The executive branch has the police, or at least the federal Justice Department, going after another branch that doesn't have protection that way, that's very concerning to me. I think that, and along with the use of power to go after your political opponents in sort of like gangster ways, going after the law firms, going after higher institutions of higher learning, saying, do what I tell you to do, or I'm going to pull your funding. Do what I tell you to do, or else. That is very concerning to me, and I think that's what I worry about the most, because I fear that most Americans aren't watching that as much. They're concerned about their kitchen table issues. Meanwhile, the democracy that we hold dear is being threatened and attacked every day. And I'm not sure where we come out at the end of Trump if he continues this and people and institutions continue to fold.
Well, the positive so far is that the courts have pushed back on almost all of those cases. I mean, this week alone, he's lost so much in the courts.
Oh, yeah.
So the weaponization of the government, sticking with this Wisconsin judge situation, we've seen him come after now Miles Taylor, Chris Krebs.
Yeah.
This week, he signed an executive order to investigate Act Blue. And what is Act Blue? It's the primary fundraising platform for Democrats. So,
right.
To your point, when you factor in universities, you factor in the law firms, you factor in the attacks on judges and the judiciary, and now you're going after the fundraising ecosystem of the Democratic Party, it is beyond unprecedented. It is unfathomable. Yeah. But I do hold out that the courts will continue to serve as the critical check on him, even with the abdication of the co-equal branch of government you spoke of before with Republicans in Congress. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like the courts can be the dam to hold this up?
Look, as an American, I have to feel that way. I have to believe in that. And my hope is that the people that are on the bench around our country right now will do some soul searching and stand up for our democracy, because they're it. They're the sort of backstop at the moment. And the military is to some degree, but we really need the courts to step up. And then we need to focus on elections.
Do you feel like
we need to get back power?
Well, we see the town halls that Republicans have been holding. We see the anger and the frustration among voters on the right and the left. This is intensifying. It's not slowing down. There are Democrats like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Chris Murphy, Maxwell Frost, Sean Casten. There are a bunch of Democrats who are out there doing the same thing, going into the heart of red districts and speaking to these folks when their own Republican congresspeople are too afraid to do that. And so I think that's a very smart strategy. But do you think that that's going to be the thing that gets us through this? That if we're going to rely on the media or Congress or the courts, I think we're dead. We got to rely on ourselves. And we, the people, right? We can go vote. We could change it all, right?
We
do.
Simple. And I'm an optimist. I have a lot of hope. I'll give you an example. One of my mother's friends, my mother's in her 80s, one of her longtime friends, a couple who are the same age as my mom. They live in Arizona. And I had a call, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and I was able to talk with them. And the man, Rich, who is my mom's friend, mid-80s, said to me something I thought was very profound. He said, after we talked about the state of the nation a little bit, he looked me in the eye. We were over Zoom, and he said, Amy, I'm like 85 years old. I have never protested anything in America ever. And I'm going out there and I'm standing in line with this protest. And I thought, I got chills when I was talking to him because I thought, okay, it's okay. It's going to be okay. If we got people like that are willing to go out there for the first time and go make their voice heard, we're going to be okay. Now, we live in this democracy. We can't change the power structure right now. That's what we have elections for. So I think we have to focus on making sure we have good candidates, contributing to those campaigns. This is so important. We cannot forget about that. Mm-hmm. We cannot forget about that. But we also have to get out there in whatever way you can, whether it's your local town hall or a protest, and just stand out peaceful protests. We can make a difference. We already have.
What do you think of DNC Vice Chair David Hogg's plan to inject $20 million of his Leaders We Deserve organization's money into primarying older, quote-unquote, less effective Democrats in safe districts? This is a plan which, by the way, has been publicly criticized by DNC Chair Ken Martin.
Well, I'm not a fan of it, and here's why. We have limited resources. If you really want to make change in this country, I think there are many down-ballot races and many down-ballot seats that need to be funded. So if you got $20 million, we should be looking at districts around the country that are at the state level. I mean, this is how the Republicans gained so much of their power. This is how they were able to redistrict. This is how they were able to win the House of Representatives, because they had redistricted, because they went at local races, state-led races, and they won them, and they put a lot of money into this. We need to do the same. Why on earth would you go after, spend money to go after Democrats who are in safe districts, who are really just representing their people? They keep getting reelected, so they're representing the will of the people for their districts, when we should be helping at the lower levels, in my mind, in order to really make change long term. So that's what I would say to him if he were in front of me.
And just to play devil's advocate on that for a moment, because I'm sort of torn. I understand where he's coming from. I have a Gen Z at home, so I understand how disaffected they can be, how they feel like the system has failed them. But with David in particular, coming out of his trauma down in Parkland, he watched the nation pretty much do nothing for several years. And the only changes that took place with gun reform occurred through his efforts and the efforts of others down in Florida. So what do you say to these young people who are so disenchanted with politics, so frustrated with the inertia in the system and their efforts to somehow change the system. And look, politics is all about people fundraising and helping to get their chosen candidates elected. Everybody does it, right? So if a young person wants to use money that they have to help young people get elected, from where I sit, so be it. But, you said something before, and I just wanted to push back just a little bit on that, where you said, like, primarying people in these safe districts. I mean, they're just there, they're going and they're doing their job and they're serving the people. What do you say to someone like a Hogg who says, they're not serving me? They haven't served me. Roe is gone. Kids are still getting shot in school. The environment, you talked about floods. I'm with you. I think we're all going to die underwater someday.
Yeah.
Like, what do you say to these kids who don't know any other way to shake up this system, but maybe through efforts like what he's trying to do?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is look at those cases. So look at the repeal of Roe. Look at gun reform. Who stopped that? It wasn't the older Democrats in those safe districts that stopped all that. It was Republicans. And how did Republicans stop it? They stopped it because they had the majority. So you got to get the power of the majority in the full House of Representatives, in the full Senate, away from them. Well, how do you do that? You don't do it by primarying Dick Durbin. AOC, a lot of people like her, and that's fine. Guess what? She didn't win a purple district. Her seat was already blue. It didn't have an effect on the power structure in our country, okay? So you may like her, but that seat isn't one of the ones that we need to win to get power. So let's talk about getting power. And how do you get power? You've got to win these purple districts. And I'm sorry, but there has been, in history, in American history, there has been no purple district in America that has been won by a super far left young candidate or a super far left candidate at all. And I love the far left. I love talking about values and all of these things that, like David Hogg, what he went through, what he brings. It's important for our country. But if you're talking about winning power, you've got to have candidates that can win in purple districts. And they've all been more middle of the road type candidates. You're Jason Crow, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, Chrissy Houlihan. Those types of people are the ones that win in these purple districts. So that's what I would say if you really wanted to focus on House of Representatives or federal races.
Yeah, someone once said to Michael Jordan, there's no I in team. And he said, yeah, but there is in win. So I hear your point. And here's where I'm going to agree with you. If it's up to me to answer this question, I'd say one of the reasons we lost Roe is because we allowed Donald Trump to win in 2016. And how did we do that? Well, look at the voting statistics for people under 30. Okay, the bulk of the electorate turnout is usually around 55%, something like that. Under 30 years old, 30%. So if you really want to change this country, change the system from the inside, vote. I mean, that's my big beef. That's my big frustration.
And if you're the Democratic Party, there is something to making sure that we are talking to those individuals. That means you got to be on all platforms.
Yes.
That means you've got to be where they're at. And that's one of the reasons I started my show with Denver Riggleman, because we want to be everywhere. We have to have a relationship with a different generation that doesn't watch PBS, okay, and NPR, and doesn't care and doesn't, have are not swayed by the normal electoral commercials that we've all sunk a bunch of money into. We have to be in places like TikTok. We have to have candidates that, you can't be running around with a flip phone. Okay? And that's what a lot of our older
giveaway,
senators
the flip phone.
have. So we have to speak to them.
Yeah, that's such an important point because our young people are the future. And so if I was running the DNC, that would be my first priority. Take 30%. How do we make it 40%? How do we make it 45%? Amy, thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation, and do come back again soon.
I'd love to. Thanks for what you do.
Alrighty. Likewise. Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Lengyel. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.